Alright, I'm back again. This is video 2 of the series on the Axis Medium Walker. Axis Medium Walker for dust tactics and or warfare. And since the last video I have gotten some work done, and don't kill me, it's not a lot, but I wanted to explain. So I did decals, and there's actually a couple of different sets of decals on this. I'll do some close-ups. So I was explaining to a friend that I was waiting on my decal sets from dust models from the Dust Studio, and he said, well, I have some King Tiger decals that I'm not using if you'd like those. And I was like, awesome, that'd be great. So that became the number on the front there and the kill markings for both guns. Now the funny thing here is that these are actually the kill markings for one gun, but I divided them in half and put them on both. And what else? Oh, and the gun shields got these really cool knights on horseback. But then the Dust Studios model, before I get to that, and then of course the crosses, the Ludwig got the caught it. Ludwig got the crosses on either arm. Oh no, there's the other shield. So they got crosses on either arm. But then the Dust Studios decals showed up, and all I used on those, because I'd kind of already taken care of everything that I wanted to do, is they got the little warning symbols on the drums. And again, I'll do close-ups, and perhaps you'll see it right there. Let's see if we do that. Anyway, so I got that all done because really, decals are decals. There's nothing special about doing these, and I've done a video on decals, which you can watch if you click right there. Yeah, there we go. Click inside that, and yeah, click inside that. You'll get to my decal application video. All right. So aside from that, I did a little bit of paint, not a lot. The gun drums, or the ammo drums for the guns, they became Vallejo green gray. This has become my stock kind of heavy weapon color for my Axis infantry, and so I try to incorporate it in other ways. So it's there, it's on those. It's also on parts of the machine gun, and just not the machine gun itself. Essentially, the optics around it and the ammo drum underneath is also the green gray. And I don't think so, but it's entirely possible that it'll show up elsewhere later on. But I don't think so. Oh, before I forget. So also, well, okay, before I forget, this gun and the machine gun both became Citadel Lead Belcher Gray. Just Lead Belcher. It's actually one of my favorite metallic colors these days, because it's a really nice dark starting out color for doing, especially for gunmetal kind of things, and you can wash it down and create a much more realistic gunmetal color. But it's also dark enough that you can highlight it with like a silver and really get a nice blend of colors. So those guns got that treatment, and the claw might as well, but it has not yet. And that's it for painting. But there's one more thing that you might have noticed that I did, and that was I magnetized the machine gun onto here. I have an issue. I've always had an issue with these models. They're absolutely wonderful, beautiful models, but elements of them, like this machine gun, are extremely delicate. If I were to mount a an aerial on the back here, that would be another issue. And so what I did, and I just did this in the simplest way possible, I have a large magnet just glued straight on to where the machine gun normally mounts. Just plopped it right on there. I clipped the peg or the pin off of the bottom of the machine gun mount, and I glued a very tiny magnet to the end of that, and that's it, right? So the big magnet provides all the strength for holding the machine gun, and the small magnet makes it so that it doesn't look awful. And the big magnet holds the small magnet well in place, and it also means you don't have to hunt around for figuring out how to place it. It just goes right there, and you're good to go, and anywhere you place it on there is fine. And you know, it rotates around, and if it gets knocked, it gets knocked. It's not a big deal. If I decide, I haven't even decided for sure that I'm going to put an aerial on this. It kind of wants one, and if I do, then I'm going to chop this thing off here. I'm going to mount the same size magnet that I have on the front here onto the back here and do the same thing. But I may not do that. This is, at the end of the day, this is not a display model. This is a gaming model. I just want it to look cool, and so there are kind of balances and limitations to all that that you always have to make sure that you have a functional piece. So that's what I'm doing. What am I doing next? All right, so with the decals on, I need to seal them in before I do anything else. If I try to go in and start weathering with the decals unsealed, it's entirely possible that I could screw up the decals or get something underneath them to ruin the look of them. And honestly, I should have sealed these before I even got started today with this video, but that's okay, because we can just talk about it. As far as you're concerned, it's all just going to happen, and there will be no delay for you. It'll just be for me. I've actually been really excited about this project overall, because again, this is the first video I've done in a long time where it's all about what stuff that I'm doing for me. It's not for anybody else, it's just for me, and I love it. And something else that I've gotten that has really inspired me recently, other than the decals, by the way, just so you know, the Dust Studios decals are wonderful, really good. Near as good as something you'd find in a really nice model kit if you were just buying like a Tamiya kit. But with the decals, I got the modeling book, the Dust modeling book. It was originally in Japanese, translated into English. Boy, talk about being inspirational. And the other neat thing is there's at least 3 different models with this style of camouflage on it in the book. I highly recommend it. I may do a little review video, a little short review video of it, because I found it to be very inspirational. If I have a complaint at all, that's because it's translated from another language. There's some little short stories that kind of go with little dioramas, and they're really more like vignettes, like not even full stories. Like, for example, the testing of the first German Walker, the first use of German Walkers in combat in the Adan. Really cool little, potential vignettes, but the translation isn't great, so it's really clunky to read, and you kind of, like, the whole time I'm kind of editing it in my brain, which made it less fun to read. So, so it's still cool to have that information there, and as long as you don't mind that, and you can kind of work through and do the translation on the fly, or not even translation, the editing on the fly, because it's in English, sort of, for the most part. It's just clunky sentence structure. Sometimes you kind of stumble over things. Anyway, except for that, it's a very, very inspirational book, and it's really wonderful models, custom built to be dustified, and I find that stuff to be very inspirational. It's model porn. It's what it is. It's model porn. So let me go do the clear coat. And I think after that, then we're going to get started on basic weathering. And to begin with, I think that's going to be some airbrush shade. And I got to see if I have enough of my coal black left. If I want to do that, I still haven't decided. I'm either going to do basic shading with the coal black, a very thin, transparent mix of coal black through the airbrush, or I might just go straight to raw umber, which is, you know, sort of more of my dirt-defying color. I haven't made that final decision yet, but I'm leaning towards the coal black to start. So I'll give it more thought as I do my clear coat, and then when I've made that decision, I'll be ready to go. So see you in a second. Won't be a second for me, just for you. Alright, so with the clear coat done, the next step is the fade. And this is where it's really a first step of shading. Now I've already actually gotten some of this done, and you can kind of, it's a very subtle effect, so you might have to look closely here. This has had it done, this has not. You can see here that the colors are much flatter, and this has a little bit more depth to it. And essentially what I've done here is taken the airbrush, I mixed up this is straight coal black with a lot of airbrush medium to it, so it's very, very transparent. You can see how it, you know, there's barely any color sticking to the sides. So this is very transparent color. And then I've gone over it, over all the edges, all around the outside with that, and it leaves sort of a bright spot in the center. I think you can kind of see it a little bit here. No, because I did it more on that side. You can see it a little bit there. You can probably see it more here because I've gone actually over the decals, and while you don't necessarily see the color on the decals, you can completely see how that center 3 is much brighter than the 3 on the outside or the 2 on the outside. And so it really creates a very subtle shadow effect, and you want to end up with the larger panel centers as being a little bit brighter than everything else. It's a nice effect, and it looks pretty cool when done. But of course, this is just the first step. So again, like knee plate there, no fade. Knee plate there, it has the fade. And this is kind of a tedious process, and I can try and film a bit of it, but it's a delicate process, and it's I'm not sure that I can easily film what I'm doing to any respect that you could see it. These have gotten done already. You can see, well, I don't know that you can notice, but I noticed. I can see it. You can see kind of the difference there between those colors. It also has the side benefit of kind of bringing the color down slightly overall. You might have looked at the original paint job and thought, wow, that's really bright. Well, I knew that this was going to get darkened down, so I wasn't too, well, I was a little concerned about it, but after giving it some thought and realizing that this was going to get this treatment to it, that I wasn't that worried about it. Anyway, so what do we have left? Well, we can do this a bit more. When I'm doing this, I like to work from the outside to the in. So if you, how's the best way to explain this? When you spray inwards, you're going to get the most transition between the color that exists and the color that you're putting on, so that you're going to get a nice blend. If you work in the other direction, you're going to get a harder line, and you don't want that hard line. Not much you can do in the center panel because, well, I could, no matter which direction I go, it's going to leave a line, so it's best to just sort of hit it right in the middle. And this requires, and one of the reasons why I'm using a very transparent color is because it mitigates problems. That is, it's very hard to do too much accidentally. You can do too much. You can still do too much, but it's, you know, you have more chances to back off before that happens. See, so here, yeah, getting it. It's so transparent sometimes you can't even see the change. So as you can see here, I'm just working towards that center from the outside. That's mostly done. I haven't done, these guns are kind of tough because there's lots of little angles on them, and so trying to figure out exactly where you want to do your shading can be an issue. There's not little in the way of big panels, so just working with, you know, these edges again inside from the corners. Got to be careful. I don't want to really get any on the drums. I could mask those off, but I feel like I'm pretty safe from doing anything too silly here. I'm just darkening up this whole underside area. Don't forget the backs. So it's nice to check periodically that you're still getting color coming out of your brush when you're working with transparent colors. And there's just a little panel. I'm just sort of hitting the outside of it and leaving the center. The other one on the other side. All right, and this is probably this knee panel is probably a better look at this process. So I'm going to head around the outside of that panel. Underside, but then there's also this where it kicks out right at the knee. I want to get that line too. In some ways this is like the opposite of the current style of painting like a 40K mini, and you're doing the edge highlighting, and in this you're almost doing the edge darkening. And you still may go through and you know, pick out the hard edge so you can emphasize that line. But the important thing is that the outside to the inside is that fade from dark to light. So yeah, just hit. As I was doing this earlier, I kept finding little bits of masking tape that hadn't come up yet, which is always an issue when you're doing a camouflage pattern like this. Oh, no camouflage in that foot. Well, these feet are going to end up getting dirtied up pretty well, I think. So I'm nothing to be concerned with here. Am I getting it? I am. Okay. Still coming out. All right, well, I'm going to go back over all this so I can get a better look at everything, do the few things that I haven't done at all yet, and like this one panel here. You know what? Let's do this real quick because this is also a good illustration of how this works. So I'm going to work on the outside. A little bit much there. That's okay. This kind of fold line in the armor. All right, and then the outer. All right. Good. All right. So let me go ahead and do all the little non-interesting parts, and then we'll discuss the next step. So I wish I could say that there is like a grand plan to this whole thing, but the truth is that a lot of times I do weathering by the seat of my pants, and I sort of do a step, look at where it is, decide if that's where I want it to be, and if not, do something else, and continue on in this way. So I mentioned at the beginning that I might want to do the coal black, or I might want to do the not burnt umber, but the raw umber, burnt umber, excuse me. And so after doing the coal black, I looked at it, and while I liked it, I kind of wanted to age it some more, and that's really what burnt umber is good for. So I mixed up a wash level mix, again another transparent paint for the airbrush, and I've been going through and aging it. And what the burnt umber does is it dirties up the paint. It also sort of gives a hint of kind of rust coming through, perhaps, but not so much that it's breaking through. But really ages it, more than anything else. And I got some here to simulate the kind of backblast smoke. The tips of these are going to get some black because that's going to be, that's where it gets really built up. And so I've gone through the whole thing pretty much as I did with the coal black. Now the nice thing is, like for example, whenever you do these things, especially over the decals, it really starts tying them in to the rest of the model and making it look more natural. So for example, if you were to put this decal on top of the weathering, it would look way too new and kind of break the illusion that this is a part of the whole. Same thing applies here with those. The more it gets blended in to the surface that it's on, the more it looks painted on, as opposed to being a decal. So that's pretty cool. Now also, so the drums, as you can see, they've gotten a bit of weathering as well. Now they are the green-gray, and one of my favorite washes for anything green is a Athonian Camo Shade. And this is really, it's a green-brown, and it works very good over like an olive drab, military colors. It's perfect over this this green-gray, as it gives, it's still greenish, but it gives it a brown cast and kind of preserves that military look to it. It doesn't make it green, it doesn't make it super brown, it's somewhere in the middle. So I've been liking that a lot. So that got the treatment. The optics on the machine gun also got that treatment, a little wash on there. And so at this point, I am going to, I think I'm going to start doing some point washes. I think I'm going to mix up a rust color and start dropping it in around all of the bolts and rivets, anywhere where rust is likely to collect all on its own without, you know, paint chipping and such. So that's the next step, and I think I'm going to go do that now, and then I'll come back. Yeah, alright, so I'll see you in a bit. So I've created my wash of burnt sienna, and I'm applying it. Let's actually get this in frame, okay? As you can see, I'm applying it on and around rivets and nuts, and see, here's a kind of a little bit around there. It hasn't been done here yet, but I just wanted to be able to see the difference. I've got a little bit around that piece there, and on the back as well. And you don't have to be too careful with it, but I'm not actually doing a wash. This is sort of direct application. Spend some time looking at anything rusty, pictures of old tanks even. One of the problems with this color is that this is like fresh rust. So if you have something that's rusty that's been sitting for a while, it actually gets darker. So I am going to later go back with probably the burnt umber and darken up some of the bolts. Like if the paint has come off and it has had time to really get that patina on there, it's going to be very dark. So I'm going to add some of that on there. Now after I do this, I can also go back and streak it as well, because runoff will carry the rust away from the bolts or the rivets and create streaks. So kind of like that there. But I don't want to overdo it, and some of that I may end up doing later with weathering powders, but we'll see. Whoops, there goes the machine gun. So this is really representing rust that's coming through the paint. Alright, so yeah, and so here's that leg that has had a lot done compared to the one that has not had any done. It's really starting to look more realistic, a little bit more alive, and I'm going to continue doing that. So I just wanted to see, I wanted you to see where we were so far, and I'll be back. So I've been working with the burnt umber, sort of painting it directly onto the nuts and bolts and rivets, and I think it's really starting to come together now. I'm getting the weathering that I'm looking for. And what's been kind of interesting is that I recently, and if you go back and look at my other videos you can see it yourself, painted some work bikes, and I did a lot of weathering on them. But I sort of had a really different approach to that. So here, like here, I've got worn paint on the corners of these grab bars, and on these as well, on those points. But there's no like shiny metal showing through. And that's because you don't really honestly see that much in, you know, like on tanks or on, like if you look at old rusty tractors and stuff, that metal just rusts up pretty quick. But when I did the Oryx, there was a lot of shiny metal, and that was because that weathering is a little bit more exaggerated and a little bit more over the top. And what I'm going for here is definitely a lot more subtle, a lot more realistic. So no shiny metal, at least not at this point. There will be some shiny metal. All these little hydraulic pistons here on the legs will end up being very shiny in the end, because those would be very shiny. I mean, those just, all those do is, you know, move in and out, are constantly lubricated by the oil, and so it's going to be the only shiny metal part on here. Not that there's not other like exposed metal parts, like this gun, for example, is metal, but this is the lead belcher, and it's got some Nuln oil wash over it. That's not final. The Nuln oil wash ends up looking a little dirty just on its own, so it's just going to get another pass, I think, with the lead belcher before that's finished. But I have gone over just about everything, and so at this point I'm actually hunting for things to paint. I mean, there's still things that I know haven't been done. The claw is not yet painted. That may get the I think that's going to get the lead belcher, although I don't know, I think I may still go with the green gray on that. I think I'm going to do Panzer gray on the backs of the Nebelwerfer. I've seen that part in dark colors, and I think that would look good. A little contrast there, a little solid color. And what else? At this point, I'm trying to remind myself I'm not just talking for your benefit. I'm talking for mine. I don't know. I think. Well, I'm going to go through and I'm going to do those few things that I've mentioned, and then maybe I'll assemble it and take a look and see what it seems like I've missed. Oh yeah, I still need to do the final airbrush blackening of the Nebelwerfer tubes and the end of the 88s to sort of finish off the blast weathering on those. But honestly, this is coming along a lot faster than I expected. So you know, it may not be too long before this is complete, which will be cool. Can't wait to see it done. All right, so let me go get that work done, and then I'll come back. So I'm getting towards the end of the paint work on the walker, and I realized I didn't have a finished base yet. So I started working on this, and this is just the standard base on the bottom, and then cork, and then I've coated this with some Vallejo sandy paste, and I'm hoping that's going to give it more of a like a concrete look, and then the whole thing obviously looks like it's broken up. And I will probably add some more detail to it as time goes by, but right now I'm waiting for that sandy paste to dry, and then I'm going to look about, you know, like how I want to position the legs, because I kind of like to do it if I could get a you know, a little bit of action to it somehow, so that it wasn't just standing flat on there, but without getting that Nitaflex, I might not really be able to do much with it. So for now, you know, it's fine. By the way, I did paint the little hydraulic pistons got some lead belcher in there right now, and then I'm going to highlight a little later with silver. And the gun shields are now on. I didn't end up putting them as far back as I was thinking I was going to do. When I positioned them that way and was looking at them, I didn't really think that they looked right. The reason I was thinking about doing that originally was that in some of the, I was able to get more interesting positions out of the guns with the shields back a little bit more. But you know what? I don't think that's really going to be an issue here. So what's next? Well, I gotta let that dry, and then I'm going to position things and start looking at, you know, what's left to do. I might actually go ahead and do a final pass over everything on the model, and perhaps do a clear coat on it. If there's nothing else to paint. Oh, the claws. I still haven't done the claws. Yeah, that claw's still not painted yet. So I should go look at that. All right, let's go do that, and we'll come back in a little bit and we'll see where we are. So when the coat dried, I decided I wanted more things going on in between the cracks. So what I've been doing is sprinkling on some just regular playground sand over super glue, because that'll dry right away and it'll add, it'll kind of fill in that area. I keep about, I don't know, 2 pounds of playground sand around for just this kind of thing. It's cheap. If you do a lot of terrain work, I highly recommend going down to your local hardware store and just buying. I think it's like a 25-pound bag, and it's under $5. I want to say it's under $2, but I don't remember offhand. It's been a while since I had to buy it. It's really the best deal in terrain making. Anyway, so this is coming along, and I even though that is super glue, I'm going to let it dry for just a little bit before I worry about getting to paint yet. And the idea here is it's going to look like, I think I'm going to make it look like kind of a fallen stucco wall. And then for paint, I realized I never painted the optics on the machine gun, so I need to do those. And I think what I'm going to do is one of my kind of old school techniques, which is I'll paint the lenses silver, and then I'm going to use Tamiya clear red over the top. It really looks like a nice lens color when you do that. So there's that. And then I really want to get this mounted on the base as soon as possible. My final weathering work is always about sort of tying in the base colors to the feet, because that kind of really sells the whole thing, as if it had actually been walking around wherever the hell, you know, this thing is. So that's where I am at the moment, and I'm going to go get that work done. Yeah, that's almost dry already. So I'm going to get that work done, and I will come back and we'll see where we are. This project looks like it's going to be completed by the end of this video. But no guarantees. We'll see what happens. So as you can see, I've got paint on the base now, and it was really straightforward, very simple. I primed the whole thing Panzer gray, which is really dark gray. It's almost black. And then I dry brushed all the edging. Well, it's really sort of a mid-tone gray. I can't remember what it's called. I think it's That was Joe Sonia's Nimbus Gray. I use a lot of Joe Sonia paint, especially during doing terrain stuff. Nimbus Gray is, you know, again, just sort of a mid-gray, not a light gray, not a dark gray. And that's for anything that's supposed to look like, you know, the concrete. And then I mixed up a thin coat of P3 Hammerfall Khaki and just coated all the stucco areas. And while that was still wet, and it stayed wet for a while because it was a very thin coat, just water thin, I dabbed it with burnt sienna to give it the other color and really weather it, make it look more realistic, more real. Real being realistic. Anyway, I like how it turned out. It's pretty nice. I think the concrete gray might need another lighter tone just to make it pop a little bit more. But otherwise, this is just about done. So then the other thing I did was I took the feet and dusted them up with the concrete gray color, that Nimbus Gray. Just really lightly, starting from the bottom, and then working, you know, feathering it up into the ankles, but not really going any farther. And the idea being that as it stomps through the city, it's going to kick the dust up. The dust is going to land and stick to a certain extent on the legs. And so that is going to provide some continuity between the base and the model itself. Oh, yeah, and I did the optics. I like that effect. It's not, you know, I didn't want to paint it, you know, gem style, 40K gem style. I wanted it to appear, again, more realistic. The whole concept of how I'm painting this thing is really more how I would paint a World War II model kit as opposed to, say, a 40K gaming piece, which is moving in the more towards the realism and less away from the sort of artistic expression. Yeah, so at this point I'm going to mount the model onto the base. I'm probably just going to super glue it down, and once it's there, I'm going to take a closer look at it and see what else needs to get done. But first I want to get that little bit of lighter gray on there, and yeah, and then I'll see where it is. But I think we're getting really close. I was going to use weathering powders on this, but I think that's just going to take the weathering a little farther than I want to go. And I think the weathering may be complete. So what I'll end up doing is doing each of the weapon schemes, you know, mounting it up there, taking a look, seeing if I missed anything, seeing if anything wants more paint at all, and, you know, possibly calling it done. And then it'll go get some photographs, and then I can go get this video up and you'll be able to see it. And well, that will have already happened by the time you're watching this, so I guess all this talk is redundant. Anyway, let me go do that. The next thing you see may be a completed model, so stay tuned. And as you can see here, the model is done. I could have taken this farther. I could have done more weathering. I could have used weathering powders. There's really no limit to how much weathering you can do. And as I said before, I was doing this a little bit seat of the pants, as I sometimes do with vehicle models for my own purposes. I don't always know if I want them to be clean or if I want them to be really dirty. I'd say this one falls in the middle. It's not super weathered. Oh, there we go. That's a little bit better. It's not super weathered. It's not incredibly clean. It's kind of it's a little bit in between. So I guess from a, you know, like a narrative standpoint, this thing has perhaps sat a bit before getting into the field. It hasn't seen a lot of, it certainly hasn't taken a beating, but it has fired its guns, and you know, it's gotten around a bit. So that's why it's you know, it's dirty and dusty. I gotta re-aim these lights again. I actually just got finished shooting pictures, and so you'll be able to see a little bit better how it looks. Part of the problem here is that the camera keeps adjusting its the exposure. So anyway, let me just take a moment to thank you for watching another one of my videos, and I hope you enjoy the photos, the final photos. If you have any questions at all, please feel free to leave them in the description. I answer questions all the time, and I like getting them, so I don't mind answering them at all. And thanks again. If you like this video, please like the video, click like. And if you found this to be useful, I do videos like this on a pretty regular basis, so please feel free to subscribe. That's it. I'll talk to you all later.